Great.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're here to call to order the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. I am Vice Chair Al Watkins, sitting in for our Chair Yolanda Hipsky, who was unable to be here. Today is April 8th, and if Ms. Hinkle, if you can do a roll call.
Tamara Banks. Here. Jason Broughton. Ruby Bravo. Dante Braden. Online. Joe Brito.
Surviving.
Michael Cattell. Justin Chenault. Rupert Farley.
Here.
David Fouth. Denise Flatley. Glenn Goldsmith. Larry Gross.
Here.
Rebecca Herron. Brian Herbert.
Here.
Yolanda Hipsky. Michael Hoyt. Cassandra DeGroot. David McLaughlin.
Here virtually.
You. Jimmy Morris.
Here.
Arya Nair.
Here.
Ken Poe. James Powell. Rodney Thomas. Alan Watkins.
Here.
Clinton Wells. Timothy Welsh.
Here.
And Kevin Wilkinson.
Here.
Right, and Chair we. And I got you.
Okay, thank you. Before we start, Ryan, I don't remember seeing you. Right.
I was virtual the last meeting.
Okay. So then we got your intro from you virtually last time.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Number 3 on our agenda is the vote on the approval of tonight's agenda.
This is Rupert. I move approval of tonight's agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Okay, for number 4, the minutes from our March 11th, 26th meeting, to accept those or not.
This is Rupert. I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That is also. Thank you, Larry, or Dave, or whichever. Okay, public comment. Do we have anyone present here who would like to make public comment? Or do we have anything that's been sent to us that we need to read? Okay, that being the case. Moving on to number 6, VDOT transit report a problem. Does anyone have any issues they would like to bring up that we can ask VDOT to correct for us?
The announcements.
So, next Monday, we have early Smith Road, I-95 interchange starts with information meetings. That's going to be in Caroline County, from 5 to 7. We also have a survey for that. That'll be open from Monday. It'll be open for 2 weeks. And then we have a CTAC spring meeting. That's going to be at the Jefferson Alumni Executive Center from 4 to 6 p.m. on April 20th. And then there are a few other public hearings. We one at the end of the month and a few in May. And these are also all publicly available. If you look up VDOT public meetings, either VDOT calendar, and you can find those online.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to number 7, we have a discussion item to start off from Director Hollis, since we asked for information about Virginia Rail. If we can have that presentation, thank you.
So I know you have some time constraints. I'm not going to literally read every slide for you, but you asked, I'm told anyway, to ask for presentation on the Transforming Rail program. It's a $5 billion program to upgrade the rail system on this particular line from Richmond to Union Station in Washington, D.C. The state put $4 billion into it, and the federal government put about $1 billion into it as well. Next slide. Oh, just to just to say, most of the information in the slides I've compiled from presentations by the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority and VRE, the Virginia Rail Express. So the maps of theirs, the photographs of theirs, so they're not my maps and photographs. I just took it from their presentations. So this is the basic rail structure in Virginia for passenger rail that the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority is working with. And they're busy acquiring additional sections of rail that will be owned by the state of Virginia through the Passenger Rail Authority, no longer owned by the freight rail companies. So effectively what we're doing is we're purchasing from Potomac River, we're purchasing the rail right of way to Richmond, 50% of it. So the one side will be owned by CSX as it is now. The other side is slowly being purchased by Virginia and will be owned by Virginia. They've got an agreement to, I think, purchase a section from Roanoke into the New River Valley to extend passenger rail down there. And there is a new section that's being purchased and worked on between Virginia and North Carolina. That is an old rail line that was discontinued years ago. We bought a portion of it, and North Carolina's bought a portion of it, and the plan is to put passenger rail on a new route into North Carolina eventually, but that's a really expensive project because the owner of the right-of-way ripped up all the track. So on the Virginia side is the expensive side where there's no track anymore. The North Carolina side, there is still track laid. So they hope to reinstate that. It's called the S line, the Buckingham Branch and the S line, which goes down here, which is not the current route that Amtrak takes down towards Miami. Next slide. So the Transforming Rail to Virginia program includes a whole bunch of projects down the line from Union Station all the way to Richmond. The long-term plan is to have a third track all the way down to Richmond. But in order to do that, they're building it in sections. And it will take quite a while to finish it all. If you just look out of the window and can see as far as the river, you'll realize that the bridge across the river only has 2 tracks. And there's no space to add another track on the bridge. So you can imagine what it's going to take to put that third track across the river. It's a huge program. Each one of those dots represents a new section of track or a new project that has to be built. And we'll talk about those as we go through the presentation. But you can see phase 1 is largely complete now. Phase 2 will be complete by 2030. It involves, well, we'll show what it involves. I'm not going to read everything on the slide, so if we can just move on to the next one. So here are some of the major projects. First one is to run 4 tracks from Union Station through Alexandria and a portion here, to Springfield. What happens over this section here is that the Norfolk Southern track branches off that goes down to Manassas. But we currently only have 2 tracks across the Potomac River, and a new bridge has to be built to carry another 2 tracks. So we're trying to get 4 tracks through to roughly Franconia, and then from there down 3 tracks all the way to Southern Stafford effectively, but eventually to Richmond. Next slide. In our region, there are a couple of projects. The Acquire third track section and the Potomac Creek third track section are going to be added. So those will have third track through there, and each one has a VRE train station that has got to be upgraded as well. So that's going to be worked on. We've already upgraded the Fredericksburg train station. I think you remember seeing some work going on up there. We've extended the platforms so they can take much longer trains, put new signage, new information screens up, built the new staircase here into the back of our parking lot, which you could see on the way out, etc. So that's already been completed. Next slide. So that just is a diagram. That's the way they, in the electronic signaling system, describe the track system that exists there. You could see eventually we're going to have to build a third track across the river here in this area, and that will need a new bridge. That will be really expensive to do. Anyway, we'll get there. Phases 1 and 2 are funded. The phases 3 and 4 are not funded. And that will take the third track all the way to Spotsylvania, including the new bridge across the river eventually. In phase 4, they'll build that actual bridge. Phase 2 ends in 2030, so we're not that far away from that. Next slide. Update on the project so far. So this is the existing bridge across the Potomac River. I'm sorry for the way these pictures look very grainy on the big screen. They're building a new bridge next to it to carry the extra 2 tracks. That exists. To make it 4, we've got to add this bridge here. That's like $1 billion project. This is the Yellow Line Metro Rail bridge, and they're the roadway bridges that exist. So yeah, you can see that's the existing old bridge. This is the new one that's being built parallel to it.
Do you know how old the bridge is?
The original bridge is very old. I don't actually know when it was built.
Yeah, so I know this one in Fredericksburg is going to be 100 years old, couple of years.
And that's not the first one. That was the rebuilt bridge to raise it above all these roadways. So yeah. Next one. So this is on the DC side. They're having to upgrade these passageways through in order to fit the extra tracks in there. They're going to make sure that is stable. They're drilling to put new pylons down into the ground. This is another section of bridge that has to be upgraded. The Potomac, the new long bridge across the Potomac is actually not going to be one bridge. It's going to be 6 bridges, because there's a bridge to the island, a bridge from the island across to the other side, and then another bridge over the roadways. But they agreed to build a bike and pedestrian bridge as well. So that's 3 bridges for the rail and 3 bridges for the bike and ped improvements. So it's a huge project. Next slide. So they're in the river already drilling, doing soil samples below the water, because they have to sink pylons and things into the riverbed itself. And they're testing alongside. This is, I think, north of the river, but they're doing soil samples there because they have to build a new bridgeway across all those roads as well. That's the existing bridge, and here you can see west of the bridge they have to fit in a new bridge. Next one. Okay, the Springfield bypass. This is complicated, but it's fairly simple to explain. We bought the rail right of way to lay the extra tracks in 2 sections. From Union Station through to Springfield, all of the existing train stations are on the west side of the tracks. South of there, all the way to Richmond, all the train stations are on the right-hand side of the tracks. So they bought the left-hand side right away and the right-hand side, or the western side and the eastern side. That leaves you with this. So they're building a big concrete flyover to switch the trains, the passenger trains from the western side of the CSX trains across to the eastern side of the CSX train. And to do that, they're going to build this really expensive big concrete flyover in order to get across. And you'll see some pictures of that happening here. So this is the CSX line. We're coming down here, and in order to get the trains across to that side, they're building this massive concrete structure. In order to do that, it's to avoid rebuilding all the train stations. So they're rather building this concrete flyover. That is a $405 million project just to build that concrete. Next one. So this is already completed. If you've been on the train recently, the Quantico station used to just be that little box there, and that track and this track. Now we've had to add a third track, which is that one over there, but it's on this side, and it's a brand new track. It used to be an old siding that's been rebuilt and turned into a third track. So we built over 9 miles of the third track through Quantico into North Stafford. It's already complete. The trains are using it already. And the idea eventually is to build a fourth one. One day when we're rich and have got a lot of money to spend, we will build a fourth track so that those 2 tracks will be CSX and these 2 tracks will be for passenger rail only. And then we can separate freight and passenger rail, because you probably know this, but the freight trains go really slow. And if you're in a passenger train, you don't want to be stuck behind a freight train, because then your journey takes forever to get there. So we're trying to separate the 2. And this is to be able to get to the other track. You've got to be able to get into the center without walking across the tracks and endangering yourself. So they built elevators and stairs to get over to the third track. But this already exists. We finished this section, this 9-mile section of third track, and they upgraded the station at the same time. So that's the first piece of the third track that's already complete. Just enters the north of Stafford County. I went to the ribbon cutting. Actually, Meg Bomke was the chair of, from our region, was the chair of BRE when they opened this, and she actually did the ribbon cutting in Quantico. Next slide. We weren't allowed to drive there because we don't have security clearance. So they put us on a train and drove us in the train into the ribbon cutting because we weren't allowed to actually go into Quantico. So now we get to our region, and I'm sorry again, when you blow these slides up on a screen, it's very bitmappy, but the Quiet Creek third track has got to be built, and the Potomac Creek third track has got to be built, and they're going to do this one first. And I'll talk about that in a moment. That's going to be just over 4 miles. This is 3 miles of track. And then eventually down in Spotsylvania, they're constructing a third track as well. So these are the next sections that will affect us. This one is going to be built first, together with the upgrade of the Leland Road train station. Next one. We've done the Fredericksburg station. We're about to do the Leland station and improvements, as well as the third track. And then later, in a couple of years, they'll get to the Brook station and that other section of track that has to be built. These are just some other details. They're buying new Amtrak rolling stock and other things. Next. So this is the part you already know. We lengthened the 2 platforms in Fredericksburg and put the back stairs here into our back parking lot, as well as remediation, repairing that bridge, this bridge, and one other bridge on the section. It's already done. Next one. This is what's happening now in Stafford. They've already started out there. We're acquiring extra right of way there. These 2 tracks exist, and this is what's being built by the Virginia Passenger Rail authorities. That third track through that section of Stafford.
Not exactly, I suspect. That shows wooden cross ties. Aren't they using concrete cross ties?
No, they're wooden. If you go up here to the train station, you'll see they're all wooden now. Go and have a look. In fact, they're replacing the wooden ones up here above us with wooden ones again. The new ones are lying in a pile that are installed.
Did they use wood? Did they use concrete cross ties in Quantico?
Yes, but here they're using wood.
Huh.
I don't know why.
How long did the wood last?
Quite long. Well, in Africa, they use ironwood, which lasts for a long time. It's very hard wood that they use. Like a lot of the softwoods that get used for wood carving and furniture. It's very hard wood.
No, I put some pennies on a track at Widewater, and I was watching the trains go by, and that track was actually going like this.
It's meant to move because of the ballast. The rock underneath, the crushed rock, is there to absorb some of that movement. Next one. In fact, the tracks also need to move sideways because you'll notice on the track you don't hear that clickety clack sound that you used to hear on trains because they've welded the track together. So the expansion joints are gone. So if you weld it together and it can't expand, when the rail gets hot, it has to expand. So it expands sideways instead of long ways because they welded them together. So this is the problem here. This bridge in Stafford, you can see if we're going to put a third track here, there's not enough space. So this entire road bridge has to be removed. It's north of the VRE station, Leland Road. That Leland Road bridge has to be taken down. They have to widen the gap and then build the bridge back with enough space to actually eventually put 4 tracks in there.
Was that the one built 10 years ago?
No, it's an older bridge.
Developer built one, the profit.
Yeah, this is not a proper bridge. It's an older bridge, but it has to be removed. They're starting work on that already. They're out there drilling soil samples and removing the services, the water and electricity and sewer infrastructure has to be moved so that they're able to work there. They're doing that now. And from sometime between mid-January and mid-February, they're going to close this bridge to vehicular traffic. And there's an alternate route that's been agreed to that the traffic will have to use so that they can start demolishing that bridge. So it's going to happen pretty soon. January, they're going to start work on demolishing that bridge.
Are they going to make it wide enough for a 4th track?
Yes. Yeah. So we're putting a 3rd track here, but eventually CSX will put a 4th track there. Is the platform on that side? Platform is on that side. This is looking north.
Yeah. How they have room to get the third track?
Yes.
Platform?
Well, they're going to do a little cheat. They're going to slightly curve the track.
Okay. Right.
Next one. So that's what we're in VRE. So VRE is doing the station upgrade, and VPRA, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, is adding the 3rd track. It's 2 separate projects, but they're doing them simultaneously so that we can limit all the disturbance. So they're lengthening the platform and putting a new pedestrian access into the parking. They initially were going to put a whole new parking situation here, but they have found that because the ridership hasn't grown as fast as they predicted, they don't need the extra parking right now. So in future, it might be done, but it's not going to be done now. They're also putting a bike and pedestrian path down the side to provide access for people who bike to the train station. So there's an upgrade, and there's I think this is the roadway bridge. This is the bridge that has to be removed in order to make that all happen. So that's going to start happening from January on. Won't all happen in January, but the demolishing work will start. Next one. You can see here improvements that I can't. Yeah, so they are increasing the parking capacity, but it's not. They planned a much bigger expansion and they cut it down to a smaller package, estimating 225 additional parking spaces. Sorry, from 225 to 1,000 was the proposal. I have a feeling that this is an earlier presentation that's been revised, so I don't think it's as dramatic as this, but I'll check for you on that. Next one. Okay, so this is VRE's future plan. They have looked at the possibility of extending the rail line to, extending the service on the rail line to Caroline County and building a new train station in Caroline County. And it's really expensive. So for the moment, their systems plans to have additional buses to Ashland and there's other points to bring people to the Spotsylvania or Fredericksburg train stations in the future and not actually build a new station in Caroline County. And on the Manassas line, similar sort of thing, to use buses to bring you to the train station. Next one. That's blank. Next one. I don't know why that's blank. There's something wrong with that slide. Okay, so this is the extension of what is currently an Amtrak route. We are looking at extending through the hills to get to Christiansburg. And currently there's no service down there. So again, the VPRA has looked at purchasing or getting into a lease agreement. I think it's a purchase to extend that train service down the valley. So it's not just our rail track that's being. Next one. I'm doing this real quick. So if you have questions, ask me, but I want to get through them real quick. So this is just going into North Carolina. The existing line goes somewhere over here, so they're now purchasing the old rail right of way, which no longer has track on it. They want to replace that, but when you look at the numbers of what it's going to cost to do, so they'll need to find the money. They don't have the money to actually build that yet. They're just acquiring the right of way on old disused rail line. Next one. The Amos line. Oh, yes. Back. What did you give me that, please? Jeez.
They just been doing a great job.
Okay. It's just slow. When you click, it takes a while to move. So they're buying new train sets for Amtrak to run on the system. That's what they look like. They've been ordered. They're under construction. We've seen some of the new locomotives being used in the region for Siemens, but the new train sets haven't yet arrived. They're going to provide these. They're dual power train sets, which means they're both electric and diesel. So one of the delays is going to be removed by doing that, because when you go up to Union Station, they stop for half an hour because they got to take off the diesel locomotives and put the electric locomotives on. This is going to do away with that 30-minute delay. The same locomotive can go all the way to Boston. So this new train set is designed to do away with that. It'll provide a quicker journey if you're going further north, or if the northern people are coming further south. They won't have to wait in darkness because they turn off the aircon, turn off the lights, remove the locomotive. It's a bit of a process. So that will reduce the dwell times at Union Station.
You know what the engines cost?
I don't. It's part of Amtrak's budget. It's not part of the Virginia budget. So it's rolled into the national Amtrak budget. So I don't have access to it. Anyway, did that real quick. That's just to give you an idea of what's coming. The end result will be 40% to 50% increase of the VRE train departures from this region, and also a significant about 60% increase in the Amtrak departures. So you're going to see almost a doubling of the amount of trains in total that come through the region. The eventual goal is to have an hourly service through the FAMPO region. Every hour there will be a train all day. And that's the reason why we got to put that new bridge in. That's the reason why we got to sequentially build the third track so that we were able to have that.
Is the ultimate goal 4 tracks?
Yes, the ultimate goal is 4 tracks, 2 for CSX, 2 for passenger rail.
Yeah, hope that's out there. So,
They do this all the time, but the key is to separate the slow freight trains from the faster passenger trains. You can't do that until you really have all the tracks.
And those 4 tracks are from Union Station to Richmond or all the way down to Raleigh?
The plan now is to Richmond.
Okay.
But what's going to happen south of Richmond is you're going to have 2 routes out of Richmond down into South Carolina.
The one is,
The one exists. When they eventually build the one next to Durham,
okay.
that's going to provide you with additional 2 tracks. So you'll eventually have 4 tracks, but they won't, from Richmond, they'll part company. They won't go to the same destination. In North Carolina. Hopefully. I mean, it's a lot of money to buy.
Can we go back to like the third slide or so that has 3 tracks and 2 tracks?
Games.
It's about the third slide. Keep going. Another one. Next one. Okay. Yeah, that one. Okay.
That one?
Yeah. See, I just don't understand how they can increase capacity unless the third track is all the way through.
They pass. Trains, faster trains will pass the slower trains.
But this doesn't seem like their
On the third track section,
capacity is long enough, because then you're gonna have to have trains, some trains will have to speed up, other ones will have to slow down in order to do it. So it's gonna be a difficult situation. And what if the train is on the far track? Are they gonna switch over 2 tracks? So we got,
so all of that gets planned in advance. It doesn't sort of happen.
yeah, I understand that.
So what they do is that they plan the schedule so that this train will get to that siding at the right time approximately. It might involve a freight train having to stop for 3 minutes, but generally they try to plan the schedule so that they move each other. The trouble with now is you can't plan the schedule as easily, because what happens is weather events occur, a train leaves late, and then the entire schedule is scrapped, because now that train is meant to get to that point so that you can go past on the other track. Now is not at that point anymore because one of them is late. And when you only have 2 tracks, it limits your choices for what to do, because you've got trains coming south and north and they have to pass each other. When you've got more track, there are more opportunities to get around the problem. Eventually, with a third track the whole way, that goes away because you can then go the whole way. But the idea is that in the interim phase, you use the third track sections to pass the slower trains.
But it all has to do with timing. Sometimes that timing doesn't work, especially if a train's running late and it throws everything off.
That's correct. But the more track options you have, the less you have those problems. So it's not going to be 100% solution by 2030, but we'll be a long way towards it. The difficulty is that some of the sections that are missing involve a bridge. And the bridges are really expensive. So you've got to wait until the next tranche of money becomes available, and then he has to commit the funds to the project to be able to build those bridges and causeways and other things. So there's,
I'm sure it's going to be in the billions, and just don't see that happening in the next 10 years.
it's already billions. We've already committed 5 billion. By 2030, we will have spent 5 billion.
Is the timeline similar to building a passenger car, like a vehicle bridge? I mean, or is there more involved with building, train, bridges. Like I'm thinking timeline, are we still like 6, 7, 8 from start to finish? It's
So everything in phase 1 and 2 will be completed by 2030, and they're on schedule. We've finished the Quantico section. They're busy now building north and south of the new.
Thank you for all your robust defense.
There's only 2 tracks in the city of Fredericksburg. No plans for a 3rd track. In fact, they just built the platforms up there on both sides of the 2 tracks. So if they do build a 3rd track in Fredericksburg, they're going to
So the third track already exists down to Spotsylvania. The Spotsylvania station is built on a siding. It's not built on the main line. So that third track, the siding already exists there, but it doesn't come all the way into Fredericksburg. There's a gap there.
I'm saying Fredericksburg has no 3rd track
The reason for
plan.
that is because of the bridge and the train station. Because
And this raised track.
yeah, you've got to build a bridge over the river for the third and fourth tracks. You've then got to break down the train station on this side to be able to fit the third track in there because there's no space to put it. The platform is in the way. So they're going to have to totally break down this side of the train station to widen the platform, the concrete under the platform. That's going to take the third track. And then you're going to build that raised portion, as you say, all the way through till you get to past the cobblestone condos. There it gets back to level ground again. That project's going to cost a lot of money.
This building might be jeopardy too.
That side of the building near the track is going to be real close to that new track. So my guess is that they will buy out this building so that they can remove a portion of it to be able to fit all that in.
And-
But I don't know, it's too early to say.
And remove that new platform they built too.
Well, they might put the track on this side of the platform. So you have a center platform rather than a side platform. But that's TBD, right? They haven't even started with the design yet. So there's too much information we don't know. I'm going to sit down and get before somebody else asks.
Thank you, Director Alice. Moving on to 7B, the long-range transportation plan presentation. Eugene, you're up.
So we wrapped up our long-range transportation plan 2055 transportation goals in each survey on March 17th, a few weeks ago, with 1,073 survey results in total. So for this presentation, I'm first going to give you an incredibly high-level overview of what we've seen, and then following that, I'm going to go over how you can access the survey data yourself. Slide. So reviewing the comments, we've seen broad trends that are kind of going towards an emphasis on improving communication between transit agencies and the public, pessimistic attitudes towards infrastructure improvements due to existing infrastructure, slow progress, and public disinterest, an extension of Metro down to Fredericksburg and BRE down to Richmond, need to more promotion of our FAMPO committees and a VDOT report problem. There's a desire for developers to assist in improving surrounding transit infrastructure. There are frequent mentions of traffic light timing, and there are many comments about Route 1, Route 3, 17, and I-95. We also have several specific comments all throughout the survey results. These are just some examples of those specific comments. So these are graphs that are pulled directly from Survey 123's analysis tab. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read out each of the objectives. I'm just 10 seconds to skim over the slide and the next one. If there's anything you have a question about, or time to look over things, just let me know. Stop.
There's Ellen Woodman.
Slide. Slide. goal agreement. For each of the goals, we have the options: I agree, I partially agree, and I disagree. Goals in order based on just the I agree option. So 1, goal 3, goal 2, goal 7, 5. Next slide. This is if we include the I partially agree. We're not seeing that much change. Goals, the top 4 goals are kind of switching around. The bottom 3 goals are also. Next slide. Are the top 10 objectives on how many people selected them as objectives that will be beneficial in attaining each of the goals. Slide. And these are the bottom 10. So the survey results are available to the public. You can find them on agenda. You can also go onto the Long Range Transportation Plan webpage on the FAMPO website and find an Excel file with full survey data. Next slide. The survey data is broken down into several tabs. We have it split between the survey data and the survey analysis. So you can see survey data in all its glory right there. Next slide. And the analysis is split up by jurisdictions. That's going to be Fredericksburg, Stafford, Spotsylvania. We've combined rural counties, King George and Caroline counties into one analysis tab. And we have another tab for zip codes that are outside of the FAMPO GWRC area. Slide. Again, these graphs are taken from Survey 123 Analyze tool. If there is a breakdown of zip codes that you want to see but are not in this file, then you can send us an email and we can send it over to you. Next slide. You can review the comments on the survey data tab. You can filter by zip, city and county jurisdiction. You can also split it up filter it out based on the answers themselves as well. The comments columns have been highlighted in blue just for. Next slide. So our next steps are to review the comments and the survey data. We are going to then develop the LRTP goals and objectives alongside a survey results report. And then we're going to present our LRTP goals and objectives at the committees to. Have any questions, comments, or concerns? I can.
Well, Eugene had an amazing take to try to put this all together and knows to sort of spend time looking through everything. We could say it's going to be substantially longer as well, but hopefully it'll give you results that you can build. Okay. And next part of the, I guess, the look at providing studies from Dr. Ryder.
Yeah, so kind of piggyback, now that Eugene has given you the actual Excel file with all the survey results and everything, was to talk about how surveys are just used in the FAMPO region and kind of give you a crash course of how to kind of understand maybe what you're seeing in it. So I always like to put out this, if you put out a survey, it's a guarantee that the public is actually going to find unique ways to actually respond to it. So if you don't expect people to say, pick both options, then that's probably what's going to happen. Next slide. Kind of a great point, as Eugene kind of said, we had 1,073 survey respondents. That is an extremely important number for this region. When we roll out a survey, generally speaking, we want at least 1,000 survey results. That's kind of the big push for what we get. That being said, survey results of over 600 are generally pretty good as well, but you really want to start having surveys of at least 200 plus or close to 300 if you want to start getting a good idea. So that kind of gets into how representative your surveys are for the population. Now, obviously, if you're only surveying like a smaller neighborhood, then that number will drop. But even then, we got drastically larger number of surveys. We can still have representative samples for like 3 million, 35 million, even with relatively similar numbers. It just allows us to focus more on the results and have a lot more confidence in our survey responses of whether or not we're reaching the right audiences. And finally, there's also a question if you've were paying attention to Eugene and Ian's schedule. I think the last couple of months, there was a lot of work done, a lot of man hours to make sure that you can get 1,000 surveys. A lot of emails to employers who now probably have us on their block spam list because we kept bugging folks to take surveys. So you go out there and try to collect community surveys, particularly for this group, being kind of like the important citizens, always pay attention to how many responses they get. That is really key, and kind of equate that also with how big is the neighborhood that they're trying to reach. If it's a full region, you want to see a lot more numbers. Even if it's a smaller, just say the city of Fredericksburg, they might still need 200, 300 surveys to kind of get a good representative feel. But if you're doing a singular street, maybe you're looking at fewer surveys. Basically, if it's not getting above 80 for a few hundred people, kind of understand that's kind of a danger area. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about the project pipeline studies, because I think this is an important kind of lesson example. And I actually went through and asked VDOT for permission and the consultants to kind of share these items with y'all, because a lot of different projects often have survey questionnaires both before and after project designs and whatnot. And for this one, they had multiple projects, and they went and got surveys from the public to say, hey, what are you kind of looking for? What are the issues in the area? And then they go back to the community and say, okay, here is our treatments. What do you think? So I'm kind of drilling down on the two projects in Stafford, but be aware that there were ones in Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, King George, and there's Caroline study. I think the public meetings are for that as well. So this is for the Mills Drive look in Stafford first off. Next slide. So back in May 2025, note that they got about 600, a little over 600 surveys. So they were 85% representative. And the main takeaway here is they got very strong response from the community that they were very much interested in safety, particularly pedestrian safety, connecting gaps in the sidewalks, issues around intersections. But the key takeaway is safety, safety, safety. All right, good. All right, next slide. So VDOT and the consultants got to work looking at the various intersections identified within the survey and the safety results. And I will say, finally, I was a part of this. They did very good work as far as identifying the treatments, doing the site visits, trying to identify what can be done and what is kind of the better treatments within the constraints in the environment. So they came back, they developed treatments and put out another survey. Next slide. Asking how folks would want it. And this was kind of a shocker to a lot of the stakeholders in the group. We actually got very strong opposition to the treatments and projects presented on these roadways. And if you look at it, a lot of the treatments proposed were pretty much restricting left turn lanes. Up and down this corridor to force basically a right turn. If you wanted to go left, you have to do a U-turn at another intersection or a cut through. There are very significant safety reasons for this. And if you're looking for items to prevent vehicle conflicts, turning point conflicts, this is usually a pretty good treatment, and the road conditions kind of warranted some of these items. However, the community, and granted, this is a smaller response rate of 180, up and down Mine Road here basically said, no, we do not want these. And it was across most, if not all, intersections where restricting left turns were included, including areas that are for the parking ride lot there, and even to undeveloped parcels that where there's not actually a current intersection to make a left turn, you still saw strong community response to those. So it wasn't just something that one neighborhood said, we don't want the no lefts from our entrance point. It was kind of across the board. And if we go to the next slide, you see very similar response up and down this corridor as far as strongly oppose these types of treatments. So this was kind of a unique thing. So when you talk about surveys, if you ever want to show a survey that says there's strong community opposition, this is a good example. And you see that type of response in the ratings. Next slide. When looking at Mine Road, Suffolk Road, up to Garrisonville Road, you have a little bit different of an item. So there are multiple treatments kind of proposed, everything from a very much large widening to a full displacement left turn. So that's more like the lane switch that kind of happens at Courthouse Road in 95, that type of configuration, all the way down to large grade separated structures where you basically have almost like an elevated through lanes and your turning movements happen on a different level. And the community was generally a lot more split on this. There was more support with just more lanes along Garrisonville Road. That was the highest one, but it was mixed across. The other interesting item is that this was the study that was kind of ahead of schedule and in a lot better place as far as project management, to the point that they were able to offer cost estimates. And it was one of the only projects that actually offered that alongside the road treatment. So there was some discussion whether or not that might influence it, because we did see the more expensive the project, the less community support there was for it, regardless of other improvements.
How long is this project?
That one is basically going from Interstate 95 to past Dock Stone. Well, yeah, to Dock Stone there. So they were looking at kind of the main Garrisonville Road
Less
congestion.
than a mile
Mhm.
for 193,000? I mean, million?
Well, if you're building a giant bridge through that corridor with grade separation on and off ramps, yes. But yeah, but that was kind of the items and concerns. So we were saying kind of a different community response, and this was all within the same survey. So you saw the resistance to the mine road left turns, relatively low cost mechanisms for improvement safety, but also indifferent. You still see the strongly opposed kind of popping up on a few of the treatments versus the support. So you have a mixed group responding to this. Next slide. And then finally, and this is in Southern Stafford, they're looking at a roundabout where the new school sites are. And this is the example of strong community support. Again, I think there was a lot of interest in kind of fixing kind of some of the line of sight issues, this particular intersection, although likely this project's going to have to change a little bit because utilities and other items going on, the roundabout might ship less. I don't think there's as much support for a roundabout in this area, but at least the survey responses, and this one actually generated a lot more responses, about 100 responses more. So this one is something that you can feel a little bit more comfortable about what is being proposed here and the community being in support of it. So next slide. Okay, so I want to give you a quick rundown. So when you're looking, if you want to dig through the data, good examples of how to kind of read what the community response is that if you see that strong opposition and low numbers, kind of take that seriously, but also note that when it's being applied across the board, something else might be going on here. And we didn't know if that was cost. Garrisonville Road was kind of a mixed bag. And then we had a very strong support for a roundabout. So, I mean, when you're diving into, I think a lot of Eugene's survey responses had a lot of relatively positive feedback. So even though if you might drop down into, let's say, freight planning for the area, I think that was one of the lowest things. Not a whole lot of folks are going to be hoorah rah, let's support more trucks and truck movements through the region. But also, it wasn't completely as catastrophic as, say, the opposition things. So it might be just something that folks don't hear about as much. So if you have any other questions, I know that this was Jason. He wanted to kind of have a bigger, deeper dive into some of these projects to go through Mine Road and kind of projects there. So I'm probably going to bring this back to y'all, less so as a survey thing, as kind of playing a little bit more of a discussion. But I just wanted y'all to be aware of how to kind of read example surveys in the area. Be kind of a champion of looking at those response rates, particularly if you're trying to gauge stronger and weaker community feedback, because it's happened with a lot of surveys. In fact, cases you might have multiple voices and conflicting voices kind of showing up in a survey that might not be easily apparent. You just have to slow walk your way through to kind of understand what's going on there.
Okay, on this particular intersection, we'll know more about it in August when the two schools open. So that will be like our test run to see if the current intersection works or not.
Yeah.
Also on Truslow and Poplar, isn't there something going on there? Or? I would think the,
Further down, I think that the county's looking at something, but I'm not 100% up to speed on activities at that.
I think that intersection is probably more important than this one. Hopefully, so.
Any other questions? All right, then we will move on to 7C on our agenda, and Lita will provide us with information about the Complete Street program.
All right, so this was what I presented to our technical advisory committee last month. I'd asked them to give feedback on what I've been presenting so far. And so this kind of summarizes what feedback I got from them, and also is a peek ahead into what the final plan is going to look like. So here is the outline we've got going on so far, and it's all under construction. But a lot of that TAC feedback fed directly into section 6, which are the recommendations for improvements to the multimodal network in the region. So jumping ahead, this is bike ped specifically. We got some agreement from our technical advisory committee on what our priority corridors are in the region for developing those thoroughfares that serve bikes and pedestrians. So these are the 8 priority corridors that we had identified. In addition to those priority corridors, the plan Police Street's plan includes all cities and the 2 counties' plant projects for bike ped infrastructure, whether that's shared use paths on this side or sidewalks over here. And this kind of shows how it will be displayed in the plan, which is in a map, and each number will correspond to a row in a table that also lists out all those projects, just to make it easy to find, certain projects that people are looking for. Of course, we're also touching on public transportation in the plan, and the same kind of deal is happening over here, where different, in this case, bus stop improvements are mapped with blue dots and correspond to a table with more information about that specific bus stop and what improvements are planned there. We also got a lot of feedback about bus service and other transit services in the region. And mostly was about expanding what areas are part of that service. And yeah, a lot of these bus stop improvements are turning in from Charlie Brown bus stop, which is the sign on the ground, ones with benches and shelters, to be a bit more comprehensive. So we're in the home stretch, finish line is in sight. We will have a final draft document that we'll be presenting to the TAC next month. Bring that to you all too, I guess. But that is kind of ahead of the public comment period. So we'll be asking them, while that's in May, we're showing a final draft document. It's really for TAC feedback in the final stages, before we ask them to open up a public comment period in June. And then hopefully we can get this plan adopted in August. So I'll take any questions if you have it, but that is the status report on the Complete Streets plan.
There's a couple different plans and stuff, and one of them was using and like Brook Road. The one you showed, I believe, was using Truslow Road.
Yeah. Up here, so this is Truslow Road and the Greenway. And that's just from the last East Coast Greenway alignment that was decided on as a region, which might have been a part of the Greenway's plan. But then also we have this western connector that goes up Plantation Drive, and a lot of roads that aren't built yet, but planning for those, like the Mine Road extension, and is it Enon Centerport Parkway connector or Enon extension? So yeah, roadways don't exist in here yet, but this is what the county has signed off on as their preferred route right now for future development of like north-south bike ped.
That just Truslow Road, if anybody's been on it, houses right there next to the road, and I just don't see how that they can take somebody's land and put widen the road and put a trail like 20 feet from their front door. Rural areas, there might even be drain fields and wells and so forth. So it's gonna be a costly process.
That's what the county is planning on. I know the Greenway also is a lot of on-street right now. I guess the goal is to get it off-street. So maybe this alignment that goes up Trustlow will change as infrastructure is built out. But again, that's a conversation with the East Coast Greenway group and. I think right now, let's see. Yeah, I guess they do have it planned shared use path there, so.
I just don't see it happen. They take out the houses on one side. We have to do 70 houses or so. Of course, the east-west study wanted 4 lanes, trust me. So that would do it.
Any other discussion, questions? Thank you, Leah. Moving on to number 8, Dr. Rideout, let's start off with the TIP amendment.
All right,
Open
real
for public
quick, we
comment.
have several TIP amendments open for public comment. You can find them on our FAMPO website under the TIP improvement program under studies. A few transit program for FY26, as well as a VDOT project happening. VDOT project is going to be for the next month. Forgive me, I'm always 1 month ahead. So those are open for public comment. So just send us an email or communication of preference to us, and provide those to the policy committee. Next item, the technical advisory committee. We had a meeting this past Monday. It was a very intensive meeting. We discussed a large amount of items, including opening public comment for the next TIP. So the FY27 is available. We are looking for our UPWP, basically FAMPO's public business plan. We're discussing the constrained long-range plan methodology. Leader provided the complete streets item to the TAC, as well as Eugene provided the survey information to the TAC as well. And then we are also providing we provided a first look at the CMAQ fundings that the jurisdictions applied for funding for last fall. We have just under $10 million to distribute, and so they submitted their projects a few months ago, and we are in the process of allocating those, and that's for funding all the way on FY32. So that was the technical advisory committee. The policy committee, in March, it was moved and truncated, so it was a very brief meeting. Trying to think if there's any big item. Actually, I will do that. I'm actually going to slowly move into the member reports, but the big item for the policy committee, and the CTAC, was that they took on the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail discussion, and through their conversations with each other, they felt that the George Washington Regional Commission was going to be the best forum for that, because it includes the rural counties, while the FAMPO committee has the rural counties as non-voting members. The full CRC has them as full members, and so that was what they felt was the best place to have a discussion on that, and that kind of rolls into the reports. And finally, one last thing, want everybody to know that the next policy committee meeting on April 20th is going to be at a new location, or actually it's an existing location. If you're from Spotsylvania County, it'll be in their Merchant Square complex. It's going to be on the 3rd floor, so look for that. And they're going to be starting 30 minutes later than normal. So the CTB meeting that was mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting is going on from 4 to 6, and so they're bumping it back just slightly in order to accommodate travel times to Spotsylvania County. So if you're interested in attending the policy committee, it's in a new location in a new time for this month only, and then it's returning back to this room at 6 o'clock. No, the CTB is meeting in the Jepson Center, or Jepson Alumni Center, because Science Center, the Jepson Alumni Center, here in Fredericksburg at the university, kind of opposite of the Lennon.
Okay, moving on to number 9, member reports. As Dr. Rideout just said, the GWRC is going to be provided the information regarding the Potomac Heritage Scenic Trail and other regional trails, being that that's probably a more apt body to kind of look at that. I would say that last month we were able to see Dr. Rideout's CLRP methodology that was provided the TAC agenda. And regarding that, I have something that is in member reports that I want to present to you. But first, if anyone else has anything else that they would like to report, please do so. Everyone's in a hurry today, I guess. Okay, then, Lita, if you want to call that up.
Yeah, the presentation.
Yes. Okay, because we had a large number of new people who have joined the CTAC, I thought that it would be good to kind of go over for probably the last 2.5 years, one of our main topics, especially for me, I guess you could say, was the river crossing. So I wanted to provide those people with a little bit of the history, CTAC's involvement, and to kind of outline for you how CTAC kind of came to pick a different preferred option than any of the original ones that had been listed. So this is a slideshow, but in order to make it move a lot quicker, down kind of in the lower right, it says movie format of the presentation. So there's actually a YouTube video of this presentation that we could play as audio too. So if we make sure that's all set.
The Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, here is a brief history of the current river crossing project. Plans for new river crossings have existed for decades and decades, most notable being what was known as the Outer Connector. A recent east-west mobility study determined that it would be imperative to create a river crossing west of I-95 in an attempt to ease congestion. The city of Fredericksburg and Stafford County asked FAMPO to study a potential river crossing between those two jurisdictions. At the outset, Spotsylvania County did not support the project. FAMPO initially developed 4 different options to be analyzed. A consulting firm, Michael Baker International, was hired in October of 2023 to complete this initial study. Ultimately, 5 options were extensively studied, as well as a no-build alternative. The extensive study of the options included many components that were presented by MBI. There was level of service for 25 intersections that were analyzed by CTAC. Several different origin and destination routes were modeled to determine the travel time between certain locations, also analyzed by CTAC. The different options were screened, particularly their environmental factors, again analyzed thoroughly by CTAC. Additionally, the travel demand of the different options was presented for PM peak hours, but CTAC utilized an entire day's daily crossing volume in their analysis to also view the impact on other existing river crossings. Survey data from the public was also analyzed by CTAC, all of which led to CTAC's determination of their preferred route, which was presented to the policy board nearly 1 year ago. CTAC's bridge and parkway differed from each of the existing 5 options. On the right side, you can see how CTAC's route differed from the original route created by MBI and by a route that was created by FAMPO staff. Ultimately, on the left, you can see the revised consultant sketch of their final option C chord. Noting CTAC's differences, it sought to travel over consistent elevations, primarily over land that was already cleared. It sought to avoid more of the conservation risks than the other 2 options. See lines drawn by MBI and staff. It sought to maintain as much tree canopy as possible, and it utilizes the shortest length of median. CTAC's option C did not end there for several reasons. To be more impactful for the entire region, a second branch was created that went due south across the river, ultimately connecting to Route 3. As part of the final MBI report, it was noted that whichever route is ultimately decided upon, that the opportunity to visit the historical sites of this region should become a part of the project. As VDOT completed the study, They will determine the best location for a route, which may be entirely different from any of the earlier options presented, including the option C corridor. FAMPO has applied for a build grant to assist in paying the costs of the NEPA study, which highlights the intent to reduce regional traffic, congestion, trip length, and travel time. You will recall, however, that in the 12 southernmost intersections model in the level of service study, the amount of delay for option C is either equal to, or in some cases worse, than if the no-build option is selected. This factor does not seem to actually create a reduction of regional traffic, congestion, trip length, and travel time in the southern part of the region, which is why CTAC proposed the second branch to connect to Route 3 in Spotsylvania County, creating a larger grid and providing choice.
That is it. That was quick. Again, basically, regarding the information that was provided by Michael Baker International, that was presented in a variety of different ways, our different committees and also to the public and so forth. But what we wound up doing, because of the large amount of time we spent on it, is really did a deep analysis of everything, which led us to come up with the different option that we did. It was essentially using Celebrate Virginia Parkway, which some of the other options had chosen, but we intended to kind of move it a little bit further west and south, but east. So that's essentially what we wound up coming up with. And I just wanted it to be made available for anyone who's new and might have wondered, why we spent 2.5 years at great length to go about that information. And if there's anything I want to be able to discuss further or other questions, our other wonderful staff members here.
The river crossing actually started out with the idea 1988 Stafford County Comprehensive Plan proposed at that time. And from there in 1989, some developers proffered right away. And then in about 1990, there was a study done that showed the right of way going one spot. There was the best spot to go. And then another developer came a year later and said, well, that's on my best land, so I want to push the right of way over to the worst land. So they went ahead and accepted a proffer on bad land that went through basically a third of a mile of wetland and so forth. So it had to be an elevated road at that point. And so that kind of threw everything off. So they did a study, and the FAMPO picked that corridor that it was the worst one to pick because of environmental problems. And so they went ahead and picked that study, started out with the river crossing. Then there's a lot of opposition to it, and Hampton Roads got involved in it, and as soon as Spotsylvania backed out of the river crossing, that was about 2001 or so, then there's $50 million sitting in there, approximately $50 million. That Hampton Roads legislators got together and said, we want that money, so they took it. So we lost roughly $50 million. Was piled up for it. The river crossing died, and it came back in 2013. There was another study done that proposed different river crossing options, and the supervisors at that time in both Spotsylvania and Stafford killed it. And the study said to build the CD lanes that we have now. Then the second phase was to build a river crossing, but the politicians kicked the can down the road and just concentrated on I-95 and not a river crossing. And then years later, we're back at it again. All it takes is one jurisdiction to back out, and it's done with. Yeah. So we've gone through, over, 37 years now of, planning it, and,
For good reason. In
it's,
many cases, like the first time it was proposed, the develop of the five options, the one that provided the most congestion relief was rejected. The one that provided the least congestion relief, what the developers liked because it opened up land for development, was approved. So of course, anybody with any sense would reject stuff like that. And the other ones that have been proposed since aren't that much better.
tell you the truth, I don't think the officials actually looked at studies to see which one was better. They just picked one because it looked more like a beltway.
Yeah, the developers love a beltway.
There are, always going to be obstacles that come up, even during the course of this entire 2.5 year process. Things had to change a little bit because of development happening here, development happening there. The technology overlay district that the city of Fredericksburg created originally wanted, to potentially use one of the different options, but then ultimately determined that there was one parcel of land that they weren't essentially going to be able to use for data center construction. That wound up being ultimately where the option C corridor winds up connecting Shelton. The difficulty that we saw is that essentially with if option C has about 37,000 vehicles per day. And if it's all going through the connection from where it connects to Gordon Shelton Boulevard and then goes south to meet both Fall Hill Road, Bragg Road, and Carl Lee Silva Parkway, you have a tremendous amount of congestion in that area. That's why those southernmost intersections that were modeled for level of service wind up showing no real benefit when it's compared to not building any bridge at all. There are benefits elsewhere, substantial benefits elsewhere, but in that particular southern area, as far as the level of service goes, that seemed to be a little bit of a choke point for the congestion. And we thought that we might be able to relieve some of that by being to have a second branch and provided other people who didn't want to go into that area with an option to go somewhere else. That would take quite a bit of funding to do an additional study. That's one of the reasons that regarding the CLRP, it was always my personal hope that maybe at some point in time that a couple of the jurisdictions could seek to have that evaluated to see what kind of impact it would have. Anything else?
The transportation purposes. Can we get an update on the RTA and where it's at?
The
I haven't heard
RTA?
anything- Yeah, I haven't heard anything about the RTA and I'm gonna get an update on where they are, where they stand.
Okay, I can give you a very short update. Is that there's discussion as far as legislature proposed enrichment, was it at the end of last year, earlier this year, but eventually got pulled, scrapped, paused, put to the side this year. So there was no RTA movement within the most recent legislative session. Whether or not that's going to come back, it's probably more than likely, but we haven't really seen anything new other than a proposal that was for just staff of Fredericksburg, and then maybe something else later on if another jurisdiction wants to join, but that was basically tabled for the time being. We can kind of keep an eye, but there hasn't been any additional movement or action by the jurisdiction. An option got put forward. It was briefly like, oh, that happened, and then it got pulled back because of other state pressures, probably. So That's where we are, but we can come back. But I don't know how much more we're gonna have.
I know who I need to talk to.
Okay.
RTA here, so, I'll get with.
Yes.
Some folks might not be aware that RTA stands for Regional Transportation Authority. Something that
That's a good point.
Yeah, our particular region does not have that kind of transportation authority, but many other regions around the state do. And that is used as a funding source because there's a variety of different ways that the RTA can be funded. But what it winds up doing more than anything else is providing leveraged funding for many of the projects that the different areas of the state wind up wanting to create. And without that leveraged funding, a lot of the projects in our area just don't score very well as far as smart scale and other kinds of funding sources.
a lot of opposition to RTAs, regional transportation authorities, comes from folks that are prone to saying no new taxes because these authorities tax.
Yeah, we're putting money in.
Yeah, there's still a little issue where I guess our county is throwing money east. And what the hope was if we had an RTA that would be able to recoup that, I guess. That would help. Like, for example, if you want to put a particular project together and put it into a smart scale kind of evaluation, if you can say that you're throwing 40% of the money or, towards it locally, then that makes it more attractive and potentially successful. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn. Unless you have something else.
No, it is better for you.
I was gonna say future agenda items.
Yeah,
I do
we-
have a couple of announcements about that.
Okay, number 10 then.
One, so next May, thinking about nominations for officers, we will have the nominations and discussions for officers. We won't be electing officers in May. We do that in June. So,
Year ago.
huh?
For that year.
Yeah. Very quickly. And so the jurisdictions currently up to serve as chair is Stafford, and the jurisdiction up to serve as vice chair will be Spotsylvania, and City of Fredericksburg will be rotating off from their chair position.
Stafford has the chair now.
See?
No,
No, it's vice.
Just
I'll serve
night.
as vice chair, but it's always done by jurisdiction. So.
Yes, Yolanda was not able to be here this evening, so I stepped in.
So it's that. In addition, so with officers, I'll probably be talking with Jason because he wanted to have a discussion with mine with Rose, so we might have a little bit more on that, but not just the survey. So thank you for your patience on that shortened version. We also want to bring it before the committee that we're probably going to be talking about the new ADA guidelines, particularly for public materials and accessibility. One, we want to make sure that you're up and aware as well as helping us guide that process, but it will also mean that we might have to make changes to how presentations and information is presented publicly too. So we're going to have to be a little bit more thoughtful, particularly with PowerPoints and video formats, for example, but I don't want to go too long for that. Eugene is doing some awesome work and research to kind of helping guide that, and we're going to bring it back to this committee, at least for a discussion so that you're aware, because there's some big changes that have been coming down the line as far as accessibility, particularly for documents. So, and then finally, real quick, I'll see if there was any more movement on the RTA, and then Lita will eventually, or Lita's Complete Streets document will probably be back probably June, I guess, depending on the tax timeline. We'll get in coordination with that June. So we normally try to time it with the public comment period or just before so that y'all have the voice happening when everybody's listening. So at that, I'll.
Yes.
Oh, I just had a couple questions about the river crossing. Did you say it's still under construction?
No,
Oh.
the NEPA study, I guess, if the build grant is accepted, that will have the funding so that VDOT will actually start doing a very deep analysis at looking at all the potential locations, not just where the option C corridor went, but any of the particular options would be the best place for it to wind up crossing the river and Parkway or wherever the location would be too. And that's not a engineering type of a study. It's just more of an environmental study.
Okay. And then you also said CTAC is conducting analyses on there, or did conduct. I was wondering what that looked like. Was it just like looking at surveys and getting statistics of that?
There were two different surveys that had been provided to the public during the 2.5 year process. And the second study, which was received a larger response from the public, was a kind of a ranked choice study where the people who completed the survey were able to pick which option was their first choice, second choice, third, fourth, fifth, and so forth. One of the things that happened is that in the presentation materials for it, it listed only 4 choices, B2 and B1, essentially in the survey, but in the presentation materials, it was only B2. Because the termini, where it was going to originate in Stafford and where it was going to connect to the city of Fredericksburg's parcels, were the same exact locations. So they just said, if it's starting here and ending there, we're only going to put 1 in there. So what happened is that initially ranked choice option A wound up getting the most first place votes. But since it was ranked choice, which essentially gives more weight to the first choice, second choice, third, fourth, fifth, getting the least amount of weight, when it was all kind of compared together, the option B, I think, actually had received overall with the ranked choice voting, wound up receiving the majority of support as the preferred choice.
Okay.
Particularly when you're looking at surveys, because this was actually one of the earlier drafts, when you're asking community for feedback, you look at what is the first and last choice, because after that, when you start looking at 2, 3, and 4, particularly if you start blending them, it becomes very dangerous because that's not necessarily what you're asking the community. And so you typically look at that. You might look at averages, but averages can kind of be weighted because folks might just rearrange their first and last choice and they really don't care about whatever's in the middle. It's, I want this or I hate this. You kind of saw that in some of the, like Garrisonville Road, it muddies things a bit. And so teasing that out is kind of a option. But yeah, you typically look at one of the options was universally disliked because high impact to communities in the area. That was option D.
Right.
Option A was kind of either or. Either you absolutely loved it and there was large amount, or you absolutely hated it. Again, it's impacting the community in the different locations. Options B's and C's were a lot more ambivalent and it almost followed along. So the first survey that we did for that one also included a note that this was actually a contentious choice that wasn't really done until after the surveys came out. But in the first survey, there was a no option. It was definitely the last place. It was folks wanted a type of bridge and there was disagreements between it. So the consultants came back the second time, they were like, well, we know that no build is kind of not really an option based on the first survey results. They kind of as part of the design program to kind of, how on the intro slide I have where you have people picking poop, 2 options, you were having people literally putting all options as their first options or all options. And so what they wanted to do is actually have you physically have to order the survey selections. The benefits to that is that it stops people from just putting ones across anything and starting to intentionally throw off the weighted averages. You get a lot more consistent weighted numbers from that. The trick is also, because of that, it also required you to interact with the question. And so you could literally just drag one option to the bottom, and that's all the requirements, and it will just autofill based on alphabetical order after that. So that's the reason why we're the heavier emphasis on what folks were saying they hated or which ones they had it emphasis what they disliked. Because after that, there was how the question is designed and impact kind of influence kind of the middle. And the funny thing is that one of the options that actually had, I wouldn't say is anybody's favorite, but nobody hated option C. I worked through this group, worked through the Stafford County elected officials and community. They really had a big objection to C. Like everybody was like, no, C's not necessarily my first choice, but it works versus other options definitely had both their promoters and detractors. So I think it actually kind of through a public comment period and discussions at this table, discussions happen within the jurisdiction in and of themselves, and even just conversations with Spotsylvania County as well, because they were very much more resistant to the project. And the reason why the analysis was done in the southern area is to show there was no adverse effect. That was the big concern was, oh no, we're going to dump all this river crossing traffic onto Route 3. And well, we had to go show that actually we're not dumping it. As again, you're saying, we're not making it better because what these research did was to the Harrison Road interchange, adding an interchange there, was that additional. But as far as the survey goes and looking at, that was kind of the reasons why we looked through the survey. And we still have that material available. It's cleaned up, but you can go through to the river crossing study, that 700, 800 page
I think it's over
survey.
yeah.
And you can look at every single surveyor's spots there. It's just not in an Excel format that has the nice bar charts and everything, but it's in there. Like every response was categorized and recorded.
Oh, thanks for explaining.
Including every single comment during the entire length of the study that any person actually, submitted to FAMPO.
This thing that we can adjourn, like
Hmm?
one last thing that we can adjourn, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I made a suggestion earlier right now about having a member of the Public Transportation Advisory Board come and give us a report, and someone from CTAC, from one of us, go to the PTAB meeting to give a report. It's just so we can have consistent support for each other. I think knowing what that committee does and what they do when it comes to public transportation is important. And for us to go to them so they know what we do, so we can like support each other on public transportation.
We had a motion on the floor, but I don't think anyone seconded it, which was really surprising.